Welcome everybody to Judaism 201. We are going to talk about the last part of Sefer Shemos, where almost all the parshiyos, 4 of the last 5 parshiyos are all about building the Mishkan. And we'd like to zoom out, get a bird's eye view of what's going on, why there is a Mishkan, and explore those issues. So I am going to share a screen here. Here we go. So very quickly, looking at the last couple of parshas, this is called, if we look at number 1 here, this is called a chiastic structure from the Greek letter chi, which is looks like an X. Chiastic structure, well, you can sort of see what it is by just looking at it here. I won't have to explain what it is. So in the last 5 parshas of Shemos, there are the 5, Truma, Zasava, Kasavo, V'yachal, Pekudei. Generally speaking, Hashem tells us to build the Mishkan and gives us all the instructions. Some would add in mind-numbing detail. And then there's a little bit of a reminder about Shabbos. And then in Kisisa is the Chet Egel, the sin of the golden calf. Towards the end of that parsha, again, we talk about Shabbos. I think Vishamru comes from that part. And then we actually build the Mishkan, and that's mostly what we do in the last 2 parshas. So what's all that doing there? Why is it so laboriously explained? What's the whole purpose of the Mishkan? What's it doing? There's a basic machlokas between the Ramban and Rashi about that. The Ramban, generally speaking, the Ramban says that the order it occurs in the Torah is the order that it happened in real life. Now, there's a couple of exceptions where the Torah is very clear that it's not happening in chronological order. But except for those cases, the Rambam almost always holds that it happened in the order that it happened. So he says that what the Mishkan is an extension of sorts of the experience of Har Sinai. All this occurs, of course, after last week's Parsha we got the 10 Commandments. This week's Parsha, there's a Mishpatim, there's 70-something commandments and all kinds of, it's mostly laws. And then the 5 parshas that we're talking about start the week afterwards. The Ramban says that it's an extension of the Har Sinai experience. The Mishkan is going to relate to Har Sinai and the experiences that we do that. Rashi, and the most common view of this, is that it's actually out of order, and the sin happened first. And because of the sin, Hashem told us to build the Mishkan, and then we built the Mishkan. I'm not going to go down that route about what those differences are and what they imply for us, except to mention that in both cases, we're actually building the Mishkan after the sin, which says a lot about Hashem's acceptance of our teshuvah. But that's a whole nother tangent. What we're going to look at, the aspect that we're going to look at is the building of the Mishkan and the avoda of the Mishkan are linguistically, to a striking degree, linguistically parallel to creation. So let's explore some of those. I have a gazillion examples. I included half a gazillion of examples on this sheet. Let's take a look at them. We have the famous first pasuk of chapter 2 of the Torah, which we sing every Friday night before we make Kiddush. Vayechul Shema Ba'aretz, V'chol Tzeva'am. Vayechulu here means finished or completed. And that's actually a little bit of an odd word to use. So the shorish chal, which means all, is sort of a little bit of an odd word to mean finish. So it sort of strikes out a little bit there. And we see that when the Mishkan is finished, we get the same verb. Moshe says, Vayechal, or the Torah says, Vayechal Moshe es hamalacha, finished all the work. So right off the bat, that's a little bit of a hint that there's some connection here. The Midrash Tanchuma in Pekudei actually goes on and on about all, that's where a lot of this comes from, about all the parallels in the language and what's going on here. So continuing on, number 4, we see this a lot in chapter 1. I'm sure everybody remembers it. If you've ever been to shul in Simchas Torah, if you've ever read the first chapter of the Torah, right? How many times do we see, and God saw that he made and found it good? This particular pasuk comes from after he finished everything, so he found it very good. There was evening, there's morning, the 6th day. So, right, we see that after almost all the days, and God saw what he made and found it very good. And then, and Hashem blesses the 7th day. This is also part of what we say right before Kiddush. So God blessed the 7th day. So we see the same thing with Moshe. It says Vayer Moshe es kol malacha, and Moshe saw all the work as Hashem commanded. And just like up here, Hashem Vayivarech also blah, 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 blah. Somewhere Vayivarech is in here. Hashem blessed the work of creation. Nope, it's not in this pasuk. Yeah. First word. Thank you. Vayivarech Elokim es Yom HaShvi, right? Hashem blessed the 7th day. And here you say, we see that Moshe Yivarech Osa Moshe, that Moshe blessed all the work that was done. The Midrash actually compares each of the 7 days of creation to an aspect of building the Mishkan. I'll just mention the first 2. So we know the first thing that Hashem does is create the heavens and the earth. And the Midrash points out that in Tehillim, when it describes creation, and in this pasuk here, says you spread the heavens like a tent cloth. So that's the first day of creation. And one of the first instructions that we get for the Mishkan is to make 10 of these huge curtains, make a tent out of it, right? So there's an analogy there. On the 2nd day, what was creation? Creation was Hashem created, where are we here? Hashem created the Rakia, the upper waters and the lower waters, and divided it up. And here in the instructions for the Mishkan, we're supposed to make another curtain, the parshiyos, and the purpose of the parshiyos was to separate the kadoshim from the kodesh. I'm going to show you a map of the Mishkan shortly. So another analogy there, that the first division happened in creation on the 2nd day, and the second major instructions that Hashem gave to us was to make this division, to make the curtain that created division in some of the areas of the Mishkan. Speaking of divisions, let's also talk about that. There are the Midrash, again, notes that the word separated, or in Hebrew, havdil or yavdel, right? We use that word for Abdallah, in 3 major aspects in creation. And these are the 3 aspects. So Hashem separated the light from the darkness. Hashem separated the water. That was the first day. The 2nd day, Hashem separated the water from above and from below. On the 4th day, Hashem created the sun and the moon in order to separate day from night. And the Midrash points out that there are also 3 separations in the Mishkan. All right, so here is let me see if I can make it a little bigger here. Here's sort of an overview of what the Mishkan looks. So this is the Kadosh Kadoshim. This is where the Ark is. And there are 3 places where there are divisions. So there's a division here between the Kadosh Kadoshim and the Kodesh. Then there's a division here between the Kodesh and the rest of the Mishkan. And then there is this division here, which separates the Mishkan from the rest of the world. So the Midrash compares these three separations that Hashem made to the three separations that we make in the Mishkan. Okay, fine. So after creation, we have Gan Eden. That's where Adam and Chava is. So the question is, what are we supposed to be doing in Gan Eden? And what I'd like to focus on is this pasuk here, Genesis 2:15. Hashem took man and placed him in the garden. Now, this particular English translation says to till it and to tend it. More literally, you might say work it and guard it. If we look in the Hebrew here, we see avda, la'avda, to avoda, which could mean work or serve, and lishamra, and to guard it. And the reason why that's important is because if that's what we're supposed to do in Gan Eden, what are the Kohanim supposed to do in the Mishkan? And these two pasukim say their general duties. If you look in the English, they shall perform duties, doing the work of the Mishkan, take charge, If we look in the Hebrew, we see the shorish of shamar 5 times. And I think it's in almost five different forms. Mishamaru es mishmarto. I bolded it each time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shamars. And I see 4 from the shorish of avoda. So again, there's another indication that what went on in Gan Eden is also what's supposed to go on in the Mikdash. In other words, the Mikdash is sort of like a mini universe that we're creating, or a mini Gan Eden, or a replication of Gan Eden. Here's another parallel. What is, and this one answers the question, what's the relationship that we're supposed to have with Hashem, the ideal relationship? So the ideal relationship, if we look to Gan Eden, I want to focus on the word here, mishalech, which could mean walking around, walking back and forth. Basically, Hashem is among us, so to speak. And here in the English, it says moving about. So mithalech, as we know, halach means to walk or to go. And when Hashem tells us to build a Mishkan, see, the English, it says, I'll establish my abode in your midst, right? I will dwell in your midst, and I will be ever present in your midst. The ever present is how this English is translated with that same word, v'hit halachti. I will be, so you could think of it maybe as a colloquial, I'll be walking around among you. So that's the relationship that we're supposed to have with Hashem. And as we can see, the relationship that we're supposed to have in Gan Eden is also what we're supposed to have in the Mishkan. Okay, where are we up to? I love this one here. The person who is the chief architect and builder of the Mishkan is B'Tzalel. And B'Tzalel literally means in the image of Hashem, right? We know B'Tselem Elokim, right? In the image of Hashem. And not only does his name mean the image of Hashem, but the pasuk says that he has a divine spirit, which in the Hebrew, Ruach Elokim. If this isn't this cries out to compare B'Tzalel in a way to Hashem, about building, B'Tzalel building the Mishkan and Hashem building Gan Eden and the universe. I also can't resist pointing out, he not only has Ruach Elokim, but for what? For Chachma, Bina, and Das, which are the initials of Chabad, V'chol Malacha, and every Malacha. And so I want to talk also about the word Malacha. Malacha generally in the Torah only appears in 3 contexts, generally speaking. So one is the creation of the universe, and that, that word is all over the place, right? By calls it that, that word malachto appears a whole bunch of times. It appears many times when they talk about building the mikdash or the Mishkan, and it appears when Hashem tells us that we shouldn't do any malachas on Shabbos. And so there's a major connection between creation and Shabbos and the Mishkan, yet another essential connection. And this isn't only thematically or hashkafically, but also halachically too, right? We learn, if you delve into the laws of Shabbos and what a malacha is and what it isn't, the first question you ask when, what is the malacha, is you say, well, how was it done in the Mishkan? And we also know that malacha doesn't mean work, it means creating work. Not that there is a good English equivalent at all to that word. But again, malacha and Shabbos is an essential part of this whole aspect. So if you go back up to the beginning, as we see, what separates the instructions of the Mishkan from building the Mishkan is Shabbos. And the Chet Egel, if you take it from the Ramban's point of view, that it's all literal. Okay, so what's the point of all this comparison? Great, so the Mishkan resembles creation. What's the point? So I think one of the things, just to wrap up this first part, is that what we are doing when we are creating the Mishkan is we're emulating Hashem. In a sense, mankind was created in order to emulate Hashem. Mankind was made b'tselem Elokim, the image of God. So what does it mean? What does it mean to create something like Hashem created something, which is what the Mishkan is? Hashem made a world for us, a universe for us, that God carved out a little bit of everything and made an apartment just for us. And so we are doing with the Mishkan. So those are all the comparisons. Now, when you start doing comparisons, where you really learn what the lessons are often is when you compare the contrasts. So what's different about the Mishkan and Gan Eden? In Gan Eden, Hashem was saying, don't try to be me, just listen to me. Right? The original goal, as we mentioned some of the Pesukim before, the original goal is take care of the garden, walk with Hashem. But if you want to be like me and think you can do things your own way, then you have to leave. So we get kicked out, and we get kicked out and we're kept out because Hashem puts keruvim, these angels at the entrance, these fiery angels with swords, and kicks us out. So the question is there any way of continuing a relationship with Hashem? So Hashem tries with people in general. He tries to have a relationship, and that fails miserably. It culminates with Hashem selecting Noach and his family, which by the end of the flood, that's a little bit of a failure. And then there's the Tower of Babel. So then Hashem starts over again with Abraham. So now Hashem has a relationship with just one family, but he promises Abraham that he's going to have a nation. So how do you make a nation? For ways that are unknown to us, only Hashem knows why. Hashem figures out, or Hashem decides, that the way to forge a nation is to go through the experiences in Mitzrayim. And then we come out of Mitzrayim and we begin to become the nation that was promised to Abraham. So we go to Har Sinai, and it's our chance to fix everything that's gone wrong in the world up until then. We're now talking 2,500 years after the sin of Gan Eden. Now we're sort of back to square one with Har Sinai. But Har Sinai itself is not enough. It's not enough that we get Torah. Hashem wants a real relationship with us. You can't stand at Har Sinai forever. Hashem needs to dwell with us. We need to make a dwelling place for Hashem in the world. So how do we do that? So that's building the Mishkan. And I think the Mishkan and then the sin of the golden calf, and still continuing to build a Mishkan, answers even a deeper question, which I think is a better question. How can we have a relationship with Hashem when we're not perfect? How do we have the gall, the chutzpah to try to have a relationship with Hashem? How do we have a relationship after the sin? And that's partly what the Mishkan, that's partly what the message of the Mishkan is. So before the sin of Gan Eden, Hashem created a space for us. But this time now, after the sin and after the sin of the golden calf also, we need to create a place for Hashem. So the Mishkan isn't exactly Hashem's creating the world. In some sense, it's the opposite of it. So we need to create a home for Hashem. So what does it look like to create a world for Hashem? Part of the problem, or maybe the only problem in Gan Eden, is that we didn't recognize our own boundaries. We didn't listen. So Hashem had to put keruvim in place to keep us out. So this time, what we do, or how Hashem instructs us to do, is we put keruvim in order to keep us out. Earlier, I had mentioned that there were 3 divisions in the Mishkan. Let's go up to that map here. What I failed to mention is that each of these divisions have keruvim on them. The curtains here have pictures of keruvim here. And also this entire Mishkan structure is all covered with curtains that also have keruvim on them. And of course, there are keruvim on the ark itself. So we're telling Hashem, yes, we can do this. We can build a home for you. We will recognize boundaries. In fact, we are the ones that will even put in the boundaries. And if we respect those boundaries, then we'll actually encounter, via the Kohanim, we'll actually encounter the set of keruvim that are on the ark. As we know, what the Midrash says is that on the ark itself were sculptures of 2 keruvim. And there's a Midrash we know that says, when B'nei Yirsroel is playing nice, they look the opposite way from each other. And when we're doing well, they face towards each other. And more importantly is that this is where the sound of Hashem comes from. It comes from between the 2 keruvim. So, so what is playing nice, and how are we supposed to do this all correctly? So there's this phrase, Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe, which means as the Lord commanded Moses. This phrase appears at least a dozen times in the book of Shemos, in these 5 parshiyos. And the idea is that there are a lot of things in Jewish lives that are subject to that where we can apply our own creativity and subjectivity. So, for example, a Shabbos meal is supposed to have 2 loaves of bread. It's supposed to have wine, and it's supposed to be a nice meal. What's a nice meal? Well, we get to fill in the blanks. There's a lot of area within the confines of halacha where we can express our own initiative. We can have some self-expression, but not so with the Mishkan. With the Mishkan, I moved away too fast from the Mishkan. Every little detail down to the last hook and everything is we have to listen to Hashem and do what Hashem says. And that's why the repetition of this Kasher Tziva Hashem Moshe appears somewhere between 1 and 2 dozen times. So let's go back now to looking at wrapping this up. Let's look at the last 5 parshas. We have commands to build the Mishkan. Hashem is approaching us. And what does he tell us to do first? he tells us to create the Aron. Hashem starts with the goal. The goal is, I will dwell among you, create an Aron, put the luchos in there, and then the cover for that, and then it moves outwards, and then build the walls, and then the clothing for the Kohanim. And these are actually not instructions of the order to build it, because we actually build it in the opposite order. But these are the instructions. Hashem is setting out what the goal is. The goal is to be able to, in some metaphoric sense, to approach the inner sanctum, to approach the keruvim, which is where the Torah is, to approach Torah. And the purpose of all of this is for Hashem to dwell among us and have Hashem speak to us, so to speak. V'yachal and Bakude, when we actually build the Mishkan, this is where we are approaching Hashem. And I guess I would add, we are approaching Hashem after a big time sin. And this is where we have to do it in the correct order. We need to approach the goal gradually. We need to build the walls first, and the Mishkan first, and then the curtains, and then the partitions, and then the vessels. We need to create a space for Hashem before we reach the goal. And then, and only then, we can create or recreate not only the mini universe or Gan Eden, but our own role. Right, we talked about Shomer and Avoda as what we're supposed to be doing in Gan Eden, what the Kohanim are supposed to be doing in the Beis HaMikdash, and what we're supposed to be doing, guarding and serving Hashem. And Shabbos, as we look at that, Shabbos is also a central part of all of this. So just as the Mishkan is Hashem's place in space, Shabbos is the Mishkan's place in time, so to speak. So, in summary, wrapping it all up, Hashem creates a place for us, Gan Eden. We mess up, we're kicked out, and the Keruvim stop us from going in. For the Mishkan, we create the house, and we are inviting Hashem into our house. And we put the Keruvim there as a recognition that we now understand boundaries. And most importantly, what was it about the Mishkan that allows it to be a tikkun, a reparation of the sin at Gan Eden? And the key is that phrase that I pointed out that appears somewhere between 1 and 2 dozen times. Basu, kasher, tziva, Hashem, es Moshe. We did it the way Hashem commanded Moshe. So even though Hashem is not building the Mishkan, to show that we are ready to have him back, we need to show that we know how to follow his or her, Hashem's directions, and not, I know better. And so we see over and over again, Basu, kasher, tziva, Hashem, es Moshe, that we did it the way Hashem commanded Moshe, because we want to fix the problem, so to speak, that caused us to get kicked out of Gan Eden. The moral of all this story is that we can approach Hashem. We can build a place for Hashem even after we have sinned. The holiest place is an important message. The holiest place, according to Judaism, the holiest place in the entire physical universe was built by people who just finished doing a terrible sin, the equivalent of a spiritual adultery, by worshiping something else. And so to us, we have to make a holy place in our hearts, in our lives, despite whatever our past may be, by learning Torah and mitzvahs and getting out into the world and making it a dwelling place for Hashem. So that, I believe, is one of the lessons of the whole last 5 parshas of Parshas Shemos.